Rand, thank you so much for joining me on my show. I'm really excited to speak with you.
Yeah, Tim, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we've been chatting for a couple of minutes before we started recording, and uh, I would like to just take an opportunity to thank you. I really meant it when I said that I've been following your work and your whiteboard videos for years and years and years. I used to watch them every single Friday religiously, and it's like had a huge impact on my life and my business. So it's great to speak with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm thrilled to hear that, and yeah, trying to brainstorm some of that same magic for Sparktoro. Hopefully, able to do something on the content, video, audio, blogging side of things that can be helpful to folks.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that you will find a way, and I'm looking forward to that as well. So so let's jump right into things. You had mentioned Sparktoro. You are launching your new product. You're launching this new business that I've been watching and following for some time. We might as well just kind of talk about the elephant in the room. You know, you're launching a brand new business during a
Uh,
pandemic. You and I linked up because I saw a LinkedIn post that you had said we thought about it and we're deciding to go ahead and launch. So I think it would be a good starting point to just talk about why you guys decided to go forward with the original plan. Was there conversation to maybe wait a little bit, or what was the thought process behind that?
yeah, so originally we had hoped to launch in March,
Yeah.
but both Casey and I had the sense that there just wasn't a lot of oxygen in the room for any conversation other than coronavirus at that time. And um, that even though the launch might have worked out okay, it just didn't feel like the right type of environment. And we wanted to, give ourselves and our audience a little more empathy.
Yeah.
I think even though Casey and I are, my co-founder and I, are very mildly affected. Both of us already work from home. We have plenty of funding. So even if we weren't to get revenue for another 12 months, we would be okay. We would be able to pay our salaries and our healthcare costs and those kinds of things. But we also at the same time knew that we did want to get launched, right? We want to see
Mm.
how this company goes. We want to be able to shift our marketing, our product strategy if the market demands it. And there's no better way to do that than to be live, right? And have customers who are considering you and signing up and not signing up and canceling and all those real life things. So we basically waited until we sort of saw traffic to um, non kind of mainstream news properties recovering, right? So once we started to see, I don't know if you follow like Cortland Allen from Indie Hackers, which was
Sure.
acquired by Stripe, or like what's his name, Ryan from Product Hunt, or like those kinds of guys. But basically, they were showing their traffic graphs on Twitter and saying like, yeah, traffic has recovered. It's actually higher than it normally is. This was a couple weeks ago, so start of April. And that's what sort of made Casey and I go, okay, I think people are paying attention to tech and software and marketing again. Maybe now is a reasonable time to go live. So we waited a couple more weeks, but the plan is, yeah, Tuesday.
Tuesday. You and I had some quick email exchanges, and um, I do believe that you're doing the right thing through my websites as well. I think we all saw that little dip because everybody is just going to like 4 or 5 different websites, and then it's launched back up. So I know it's nerve wracking, but just congratulations on your launch date. It's still very exciting.
Oh,
So
thank you. Yeah, yeah. It was interesting to see kind of like that, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, right? Those properties just having this crazy spike, and at the same time that they're seeing that, they're also seeing, a complete bottom drops out on the advertising market.
yeah,
It's
unbelievable,
weird,
right?
like the first time in years that I can remember going to the New York Times and there's no ads
I know.
because they don't have any inventory, right? Like nobody's buying.
Same. I saw the same thing. I read a case study on, I'm sure you read it too, even Facebook. Their traffic was like
Yeah.
up 40% and their ad revenue was down like 20%. So they have more server space to pay for. And less ads coming in with the inventory. So
Yeah, I was talking with a friend yesterday evening who runs a sort of specialized online education platform, and was just starting out with this business, and had seen that in February cost per lead was around $3, and he and his partner were wondering, hey, can we make a go of this at all? And as of last week, it was 12 cents, 12 cents a lead on Facebook.
wow. Yeah, now's the time. Uh, Great. Well, look, I want to dive right into Sparktoro. I think I would consider myself an SEO, and
Okay. Yeah.
I am very familiar with the idea of outreach and finding the right people in your industry and trying to figure out who to talk to. So for the last year, as I've been following the blog and I watched the introductory video, I still was a little bit um, just trying to figure out exactly the pain point that you guys were trying to solve. But
Yeah.
then when, I don't know if you guys redesigned it, you came up with this phrase audience intelligence.
Yeah.
And it really just like coined it for me, like, oh, with Sparktoro, I can find exactly the people that I'm trying to network with to either promote an idea, promote a website, promote a business, and get in touch with them directly, which, like I said, I've been doing outreach for years and years and years, and it's a very manual process, like spreadsheets and Google Drive and taking notes. Like, yeah, I talked to that person, I left that person an email, and Sparktoro is attempting to solve that problem, and I think that's brilliant. So, like, please just tell me about this product, tell me about the idea, and how you guys plan to help.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, Tim, I think there's a few points of genesis for the idea itself. One of the catalysts, certainly, and I'm sure you can feel this from my writing on the blog and the speaking that I do, right, is this deep frustration that I have with Facebook and Google's duopoly over internet advertising,
Yeah.
and uh, the high cost and expense, at least until last month, of both of those, and also the lack of transparency both platforms have, right? So Google, you know, never mind the search marketing end of things, but let's just talk display. There's plenty of problems I have with their search marketing end as well, but just on the display side, if you buy from Google, they're not going to tell you, oh, you want to reach this audience. You're looking to reach architects in Los Angeles. Here is the websites that architects in Los Angeles read. And do you want to buy ads on each of these or just some of them or whatnot? There's nothing like that granularity or transparency or openness. And we think that sucks, right? I think it sucks that Google basically uses their monopoly power to dominate this field. Facebook as well, right? Same story. You want to reach people who have particular attributes. Sure, Facebook will put your ad in front of them, but you'll never find out more information about that group. And that is not necessarily what product directors, market researchers, even web marketers like yourself and myself, entrepreneurs, right? PR folks. That's not what we need. We need the detail. Like we want to get down in the nuts and bolts. I want to know which podcasts specifically are being listened to by architects in Los Angeles, if that's my target market, or by chemical engineers in the Midwest, or by people who do yoga in Toronto, whatever group of people I'm trying to reach.
Mm.
And, we saw in our early stages, right? The first 6 months that I was doing this, Tim,
Mm.
I was like, oh, how are people solving this problem today, right? Which I think is that's the core of entrepreneurship. Like find a problem, figure out how people are solving it, and then see if you can build a better way for them to do that. So I talked to a bunch of people who, outside of SEO, right? Like for complete full disclosure, right? I have a non-compete with Moz. So I'm not playing the SEO software game. I don't want to specifically help with that. I think you're right that some people who do SEO and who do outreach and sort of trying to get their content or their links onto other people's website, I think some of those people will find Sparktoro very valuable. But I talked to a bunch of people who do market research, and they paid. I don't know. Have you? I don't know if you've run into these worlds. Like these market research firms charge like $50,000, $60,000, $100,000, right,
Boatloads of
for
money.
a big market research report on your particular customer target, and they give some cool information, right, demographics and psychographics and that kind of stuff. But most of what you're looking for is, okay, how do I reach them? Like, tell me what they listen to, read, watch, follow, subscribe to. How do I reach this audience, right? So that I can do whatever. Then I can figure out my marketing strategy and tactics. And we were like, this is crazy, because most of those market research firms, they charge these crazy amounts, and they're a 3 to 6 month process to basically run large scale surveys, right? And we thought, this is madness, right? The best way to do this, we saw a few companies doing it, it was genius. Best way to do it is kind of to think like an SEO, right? Like, let me go crawl everything that I need. So they go identify a few hundred or a few thousand of their target customers online, like people's social profiles, Twitter profiles, Facebook pages, LinkedIn pages, Instagram posts, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Let's go crawl all those, see what all those people are following on all those platforms, and then do a big, cross-section analysis, sort of Venn diagram, to see what are the most commonly followed sources of influence. And Casey and I were like, oh, well, we could do that at scale. Like, we can just do that for, we can crawl tens of millions of profiles and then make that whole database searchable. And that is where the idea for Sparktoro came from.
You just said it right there, do that at scale, which is the part that you gave me a little inside look into the website. And thank you very much for that. It made me feel really special. But that really was, it was immediately what I found the most useful point of it. Well, two parts. One, the interface and the user experience is very natural, because I was thinking to myself, like, how the hell are you going to get all these data points? You're crawling 5 or 6 different social profiles, Google searches. Well, actually, I don't know if you are, but the point is other databases, other points of data.
We do get some data from Google, but it's more like, what are all the profiles that Google knows about, as opposed to directly from Google search. So, but
you're crawling a shit ton of data points and figuring out how to display it in one really easy to read and digest user experience. So like, I was very, very impressed with that aspect of it, because my initial thought is like, man, is this just going to dump me out a bunch of spreadsheets with, a whole bunch of links to other user profiles, which is kind of what those big data research aggregation firms do. They send you a whole file of just like, this is all of your people, and you got to dig through it yourself. So there was the interface that I was really impressed with. And then 2, the actual technology behind it. I'm not a developer, but when I've had products or software experiences like that try to put a whole bunch of stuff in front of you, half of it is a little bit off the mark. Let's use that architect in Los Angeles. Great, you get some of those, but you also get a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So I was really impressed with just the ease of it and the user experience of it, but more importantly, just the accuracy of the data. I'm not a developer. I imagine that's really, really hard to do and really, really hard to build. So I'm really interested in that process. How did you guys fine tune the technology itself and the algorithms themselves to make sure that you were displaying accurate data?
Yeah, so there were a few. I think what's really interesting about that is, as we started testing it, like the very early versions, before it really even had a UI, right? It was sort of like just little janky text-based thing that Casey had built behind the scenes. That was probably like January of last year, right? So a little more than a year ago. As we were testing that, a lot of the results that we searched for, even the very first time, came back with really good quality stuff. Nice. And I think that is the result of just the fact that the data source itself and the raw process of overlapping, you take 10,000 profiles that say they're an architect and say they're located in Los Angeles, and you look at what they follow collectively, and you're like, oh, that's just good data. Like, it's just good information. You don't have to do a lot of filtering. What we did find is probably one out of 5 searches, maybe even 1 out of 4, looked funny. Like, didn't return the information you expected, or was too broad. Like, oh yeah, architects in Los Angeles follow Barack Obama. Okay, great. So does pretty much everybody. Right? Like, ooh, Lady Gaga. Like, that's not, that stuff is not helpful. So one of the early insights was to basically try and identify unique sources of influence, right? Podcasts, YouTube channels, social accounts, websites, et cetera, that were unique to that audience. So if you compare sort of an audience of architects in Los Angeles to a random sample of all profiles, and you extract out the ones that are heavily followed by both of those groups, then you will get the ones that are uniquely exclusively followed by architects in Los Angeles.
Mm.
And so that was one of the insights, one of the sort of algorithmic things we had to do to get great results. Another one was working on the text-based side of things. There was definitely some big challenges on like topic modeling types of things. And
Because they
to be
overlap so
honest,
much?
sorry?
Because they overlap so much?
Well, I'm trying to think of a good example. So if you, if you use the wrong kind of topic modeling, or if you do word processing in certain kinds of ways, you get results that are vastly too broad, because you're basically including too many things that the user did not actually mean. So, chemical engineer can't really be topically reduced to chemistry and engineering, because you get a lot of stuff that doesn't work for that group. That process took a lot of refining over probably 6 to 9 months, even more. Even today, we fiddle with it a little bit here and there.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. It's almost, again, we have a commonality in SEO. So I know it's not an SEO product, but just to use this as an example, if somebody were to search like cars, right? Like cars could mean a million different things. You could be looking for specific cars. You could be looking at, I think there was a movie called Cars, you could be looking at,
Absolutely.
I don't know, NASCAR. So sure, you provided results that are within that topic, but at the same time, like, where are you going with it? So
yes. So that's exactly the kind of problem that we had to deal with. And to be frank, some of those problems are still in existence in the tool, and the workaround that we have to recommend to people is you modify your searches, or sort of, you have to kind of learn the ins and outs of the product, just like searching Google, right? All of us in our first like 2 or 3 years of learning to use Google search, we like picked up on what works and what doesn't, right? And how to query the search engine, and how not to, and what words to include and what words not to. And now we sort of have like this shared understanding as a civilization about how to use Google search.
yeah.
But that wasn't always the case, right? In the late 90s, there was plenty of bad searching, right? And I think so. Sparktoro is going to take some time to get there too, but it's been really cool to see, folks like yourself and many others like use the tool even for the first time. And for many people, I'd say like 7 out of 10 people, it just clicks. Like it clicks the first, 2 or 3 searches they do. They hit the drop down. They're like, oh, my audience frequently uses the hashtag, shop local. That should give me people who are like small business entrepreneurs and local business entrepreneurs that shop small, like that's that American Express tagline or whatever.
Yeah.
That's that group I want to reach. This hashtag will get me to that group and show me their sources of influence. So if I want to reach small businesses, whatever, in Canada, with storefronts, this is how I'm going to do it. And, if you've got a local listing software or whatever, that's the, perfect audience intelligence for you.
Yeah. I'll give you my specific example. I'm really interested in esports right now.
Yeah.
I've been interested in it from like a community standpoint. Gamers, believe it or not, are more than just like nerds that sit on the computer. Like they're really cool, and the community is like really, really tight.
Oh, and they make more money than all of Hollywood combined.
Yeah, they make a ton of money.
It is crazy how much cash is flowing through, especially now, right? I think that's one of the
Even more
one
now.
of the few business sectors that's really bright in light of COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. So a buddy of mine, he's got a newsletter. It's called weekly.gg, and it's just a weekly newsletter on esports news. And one of the weird things about esports is that it's not like sports in the sense that there's leagues. There's just a ton of different pockets of like communities that sort of put things together, and there's a million different games, and it's very fractured. So to figure out where all of these people hang out is difficult because there's
Yeah.
Reddit, there's Twitch, there's Twitter. Some of them are on YouTube. Some of them
Discord. Yeah.
stream on whatever Microsoft's new thing is. I forget exactly what it's called, their new live streaming service. And so
Oh,
when
the
we're
one that's
trying to,
associated with Xbox Live.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when we're trying to grow his newsletter, it's really tough for us to figure out like, where do we try to promote this thing? We
Mm-hmm.
tried some stuff on Reddit, on some of the subreddits, and it was cool, but didn't necessarily fit with them. And then, we tried going to some streamers and be like, hey, we'll give you $50 if like we mention our newsletter, and that kind of worked. But the data that I was able to pull through Sparktoro told me like exactly where these pockets of people hang out. And I just thought that was super useful.
Yeah, it's I mean, one thing I'm bummed about is that we don't have coverage right now of Twitch and Discord, which are very, very popular with the gaming world.
Yeah, that's
But we
tough.
do have coverage of YouTube and podcasts,
Yeah.
which are also, potentially good places to reach that sort of audience, especially with like email newsletter stuff.
For
But
sure.
yeah, I think this is one of the challenges long term is like, hey, how do we get into more and more networks, grow the data set, all that kind of thing.
Cool. Well, there's one more of like a little bit more of a personal question to ask, simply because I've been following your journey and you've been very transparent with your experience. I've seen your book behind you, Lost and Founder. And I heard a podcast, I think it was with Brian Clark actually, years and years ago, where you talked about your experience with Moz, where you made a mistake of thinking that SEOs were going to turn into just like all around internet marketers, and you tried to adjust your product to appeal to like social media and SEOs and content and all of that stuff. My hope, and almost just opening up this for conversation with Sparktoro, do you plan on just completely staying in that lane and just being like audience insight and being the best audience insight technology that you possibly can?
Yeah. I think I learned my lesson. I hope I learned my lesson at Moz, right?
Yeah, right.
That one of the things that's true is if you go back in time, right, let's go back to 2013, right? So 7 years ago. I think at that time, I ran large scale surveys asking SEO professionals like, hey, what software do you use? What software would you use for SEO? And it was like 60% Moz, right? Like 65% of people who did SEO professionally said they either did use Moz or like that's who they thought of when they thought of SEO software. And just 4 years later, sort of 4 years after Moz tried to go broad and like took its eye off the SEO ball and tried to become a much broader product, serve a bigger market, the SEO field was probably 3 times the size that it was. Like it had tripled in size in 4 years, which is no surprise to anyone in that field, right? Maybe even bigger. And Moz was more like 30%. And today, I think it's more like 15%, right? And people like SEMrush and Systrix and Ahrefs and plenty of others have filled that gap, right? They sort of took off alongside the SEO industry's probably fastest growth ramp, which was, I'd say, probably 2012 to 2018 was like the fastest growth the industry's ever had. They executed focusing on specifically that field right when Moz took its eye off the ball. That's sort of heartbreaking, like to feel like, if we had decided to stay focused on SEO, I don't know if we would have executed, but we almost certainly would have been in a massively better market position. And so that distraction is really, really tough. That being said, the lesson I hope for Sparktoro is, hey, especially because we're planning on staying relatively small, at least in terms of staff. Like Casey and I don't have plans to hire anytime soon. We would like to make sure that this business is very sustainable and very profitable before we start adding team members to it. And we also want to make sure that I think our preference is let's do an amazing job, the best job in the world of serving a small audience who really cares about exactly what we're doing, who desperately needs this data, rather than trying to serve everyone, right? Or be all things to all people, or even be you mentioned, for example, Tim, like right at the start of our call, you were like, hey, I love this idea that I can find all these sources of influence and then get in touch directly. One of the features, for example, that we've been asked about is, hey, could you do what PR databases do and go get contact information for all the whatever journalists, reporters, writers, interviewers, podcast hosts who work at all these places? And our answer was, nope, we're not going to do it. Like that's not our bag. You want a PR database? Go to PR database. We will, we will be that source of data. And maybe in the future, people will build on top of an API that we want that we can expose to give that kind of data. But we don't want to deal with there's obviously now with GDPR and the California privacy laws, like storing email addresses and phone numbers and stuff is way out of our legal purview also. But yeah, we want to stay exclusively focused on the data.
Thank you for going in that route with me. And I asked it because I think all founders or entrepreneurs at one point learn that lesson. And
why do we all have to learn it individually?
I know. And like, why can't you just watch somebody else who made the mistake do it and be like, oh, that didn't work for that person, let me not do it myself.
Exactly. Oh, I wish that were true.
But yeah, so like, I think that's really great because when I was testing the product out the last couple of days, my mind has really just been spinning with it, with all the ideas, because what we talked about a little bit before, and I also feel passionate. I don't know if you follow Scott Galloway at all.
Yeah.
And just a lot of his ideas about it's even more than a monopoly, because it's not that you don't have the choice to advertise somewhere else. It's literally that like, it can't work. Like if you want to scale your advertising model, you have to be on Facebook or Google. I mean, Amazon's advertising platform is growing pretty quickly. So what's been happening, at least for like little pocket agencies with the people I surround myself with, is in a weird way, online marketing has become even more relational now. Like you use the internet to build relationships with people and organizations. And the internet is kind of just turning into like a medium of communication rather than just this giant like flood advertising shotgun model. And so when I'm on Sparktoro and I'm looking around, I'm finding people, and you're like, oh, like I could reach out to this person and make that relationship. I can network here and maybe do some cross promoting, as opposed to just here's 20,000 people that are into architecture and you don't know who they are, but here you go, pay us money and like we'll put your shit in front of them. And so like it's very much more of like I don't know if grassroots is the right word. I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to disintermediate that advertising giant that controls the inventory, but isn't actually the publisher, right? So, like we were talking about the New York Times earlier, right? The New York Times is a great publication. I have my issues with them. I'm sure everyone does, right? But they're doing great work and they're getting a ton of traffic, but unless Google's inventory system is working for them, or they're working at scale, it's really, really hard, right? And I think that there's a much different challenge of scale if you are the Seattle Times, or if you are the Stranger, our local weekly,
totally
or if
agree.
you are my local neighborhood blog, the Ballard blog. They're also doing great work. They're also attracting an audience. It's the right audience for some businesses, but unless you are willing to engage in the programmatic transaction of having like Google and Facebook take most of the margin there, you're not going to be able to reach all those folks unless you know about them and can form those relationships yourself, right? So if you have a local Seattle business client and you can identify the 50 sources of influence that impact people who live in these Seattle neighborhoods in exactly the right ways, awesome. You can just go direct, right? You can form a direct relationship with these folks. You can disintermediate Google or Facebook or Amazon, whoever controls the advertising there. They get more money. You get more money. You can do more creative things. It doesn't have to be purely ads. It might be partnership or sponsorship. Maybe you run an event together. Maybe you have some stock in their store, whatever it is, right? you can just do a lot more interesting things. And I think that there is no doubt in my mind that when you are able to go direct, when you're able to build personal relationships, and when you are able to be more creative than what purely programmatic advertising allows, your results give you a competitive advantage over everyone else in your field.
Yeah, I love that you brought in local models because I think that's so appropriate. I live in Nashville and there's a ton of local Nashville magazines and they're so cool and they're such great writers and like the music scene is great, but it's the same old story. They have a hard time finding directly the people that they can do business with because they're forced to go through, like you said, the intermediators.
Yeah.
I think it's great, man. Honestly, I'm really, really looking forward to it. Of all people that like the tech startup world is tough, but no one's really trying to solve this problem before, at least in the way that you guys have.
That is one of the weird problems. You know, we when we did a lot of our customer interviews, right, we asked people like, oh, you know, how do you solve this problem, right? How do you find the source of influence for your audience, whatever? And they were like, oh, we do this, we do that, you know, we hire firms, whatever. And we asked them, what do you call that practice?
Mm.
And the number one answer was, I have no words for it. I don't have a way to describe the process of finding the sources of influence for my audience. It's work that I do, but you know, some people were like, well, it's part of our persona development process, or it's part of our market research, or it's part of my just marketing tactics. Some people were like, oh, it's what we used to call influencer marketing until influencer marketing meant pay half-naked people on Instagram to pose your product for $500.
No, I think that's great. That's why, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, that phrase audience intelligence, like totally clicked with me, where
I'm glad to hear that.
I get it. And in terms of like the education piece that you guys have with explaining to people exactly what your product does, I think you really nailed it with that. So I'm really excited, man. I'm a fan. I'm going to use it. Congratulations.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Tim. And thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. So, okay. So today is the 17th. You said the product launches on Tuesday. So that's going to be the 21st. So this will probably be the 22nd or the 23rd when this goes out. So if you're listening.
Oh, awesome. Well, there you go. Assuming things go smoothly the next few days, you should be able to get your hands on the product. Yeah.
Great. So, Sparktoro.com. Is there any other platforms that people can get in touch with you? You got a Facebook or a Twitter?
I am pretty active on Twitter where I'm at Randfish. So certainly if folks want to reach out or check out the stuff I'm doing there. And you can always email me too, Rand@Sparktoro.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Rand. It was really a pleasure speaking to you. I look forward to seeing what you do in the future. And one more time, congrats.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.